My dad, who once traded me for his spoiled stepson, got angry when I didn't hire his golden boy as a manager at my company. I told them they're not my family anymore and to back off. Now, they're losing their house and begging. My name is Travis Mitchell. I'm 32 now, and I'm the proud owner of a multi-million-dollar tech company that I built from absolutely nothing. But my path here, it was paved with emotional abandonment, a shocking betrayal, and a father who chose a new family over his own son again and again. My early childhood, up until I was 8, was what most people would consider normal, even happy. My mom, Sarah, and my dad, Robert, seemed to have a solid marriage. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in a nice Chicago suburb. I remember weekends at the park, family, game nights, and my dad patiently teaching me how to ride my bike without training wheels. Those memories feel like they belong to a different kid now, like blurry photographs of a life that vanished far too quickly. Everything changed when I turned 8. The arguments started small, then grew more frequent, more intense. I'd hide in my room, pillow clamped over my ears, trying to block out the shouting. One night, I heard the unmistakable sound of a suitcase being packed. Then, silence. 3 days later, Mom sat me down and explained they were getting divorced. She tried to assure me it wasn't my fault, but what 8-year-old really understands that? You just feel broken. At first, the co-parenting seemed workable. Weekdays with Mom, every other weekend with Dad at his new apartment. For those first few months, Dad really tried. He'd take me to movies, baseball games, let me stay up later than Mom would. But then he met Diane. Diane worked at the same insurance company as my dad. She had a son named Ethan, who was 2 years younger than me. The first time I met them, Diane was overly sweet, touching my hair, calling me adorable in a way that felt completely fake. Ethan, he refused to share his handheld video game and complained loudly when we went to a restaurant I picked. My dad just laughed it off. That's just how kids are. But that wasn't how I was. Mom had always taught me to say please and thank you, to share, to think about others. The differences between Ethan and me were stark from the very beginning. As the months passed, our weekends together shifted. Instead of activities I enjoyed, we started doing whatever Ethan wanted. If I dared suggest something different, Diane would. Cool. But Ethan's been looking forward to this all week. And my dad? He'd always side with them. My preferences became secondary, then irrelevant. When I was 10, Dad moved from his apartment into Diane's house in a whole new school district. My weekend room there? It was their home office, with a futon. Meanwhile, Ethan had a massive bedroom, decked out with the latest gaming system, a TV, and shelves, overflowing with toys. When I asked why Ethan had so much stuff, Dad explained that Ethan had a rough time since his real dad left, so they wanted to make sure he felt secure. Apparently, my security wasn't a concern. Their wedding happened when I was 12. I was forced to be the ring bearer, matching Ethan, even though I felt far too old for it. During the reception, I overheard Diane telling her friend, "We're finally a complete family now." The sting of those words. I still remember it. In her mind, I wasn't part of their complete family. I was the weekend visitor, the obligation. My mom remained my emotional anchor through all of this. She never spoke badly about Dad, though she had every right to. Instead, she focused on building me up. "You're stronger than you know, Travis," she'd tell me when I came home upset after a weekend with Dad. She worked extra shifts as a nurse to provide for us, often looking exhausted, but never complaining. Around 13, I discovered my passion, computers and technology. Mom, God bless her, scraped together enough money to buy me a basic computer for Christmas. I taught myself coding, spending hours learning languages and building simple programs. When I tried to show Dad my first successful game, a simple space shooter, he glanced at it for maybe 10 seconds. Before Ethan demanded attention for his new skateboarding trick, Dad never even came back to see the rest of my game. The contrast between how they treated us became even more pronounced at holidays and birthdays. On my 14th birthday, Dad and Diane gave me a $25 gift card to a bookstore. That same year, they bought Ethan a $1,000 gaming computer for getting C- grades instead of Ds. "We need to encourage his improvement," Dad explained when I questioned the disparity. My straight A's? They received a pat on the back, and that's what we expect from you, Travis. Christmas was no different. My gifts were always practical. Clothes, school, supplies, maybe books. Ethan's pile was always massive. The latest electronics, expensive. Clothes, whatever fad toy was popular that year. One Christmas, when I was 15, Dad forgot to remove the price tags. My gifts totaled less than $100. Ethan's exceeded $2,000. Through all this, I learned self-reliance. I stopped expecting Dad to show up to school, events, or take any interest in my achievements. I focused on what I could control: my grades, my growing programming skills, and the part-time job I got at 16 working at a local computer repair shop. The owner, Mr. Martinez, taught me hardware basics and became more of a mentor to me than my own father ever was. I built emotional walls to protect myself from disappointment. Whenever Dad would cancel our weekend last minute because Ethan has a special event, I pretended it didn't bother me. I channeled all my hurt into determination. If I wasn't going to have my father's support, I would succeed despite him, not because of him. By 16, I had fully embraced my independence. My grades were excellent. I had a small but loyal group of friends, and my computer programming skills had advanced considerably. I entered a statewide technology competition with a database management system I developed for small businesses. The finals were scheduled on a Saturday, one of my weekends with Dad. 2 weeks before the competition, I told him about it, explaining how important it was and that it could lead to scholarship opportunities. He seemed distracted but nodded. "We'll try to make it work." A week later, he called to tell me he couldn't take me because Ethan had a junior varsity basketball game the same day. Not even a championship, just a regular season game, where Ethan mostly sat on the bench. "Can't someone else take him?" I argued, my voice tight. "This is really important for my future. Travis, you need to understand that family supports each other," Dad replied, his voice firm. "Ethan would be devastated if we missed his game. You're more independent. You'll be fine going by yourself." Mom took the day off work to drive me instead. I won first place and a $5,000 scholarship opportunity. When I called Dad that evening to share the news, he sounded rushed. "That's great, bud. Hey, Ethan scored 6 points today. We're taking him out for a celebration. Dinner. I'll call you tomorrow." He didn't call the next day or the day after. Meanwhile, Ethan's behavior grew worse through his teen years. He got caught shoplifting twice, but Dad paid off the stores to avoid charges. He threw parties when Dad and Diane were away, causing thousands in property damage that Dad quietly repaired. He failed classes because he skipped school, but Dad hired tutors and pressured teachers to give him makeup assignments. The summer before my senior year, I worked 2 jobs to save for college. Dad had promised when I was younger that he'd been putting money away for my education. I had no reason to doubt him, though our relationship had deteriorated. I rarely stayed at his house anymore, using work as an excuse to limit our weekends together to occasional dinners. Then came the betrayal that severed what little connection remained between us. 3 months before college applications were due, I asked Dad about the college fund. We were sitting at a Denny's, one of our increasingly rare dinners together. Ethan and Diane hadn't come. Another boys' night that felt forced and awkward. Dad stirred his coffee for a long time before answering. "There have been some changes to that plan, Travis." "What does that mean?" I asked, already feeling a cold knot forming in my stomach. "Ethan had that situation last year," he began. This situation was Ethan at 16, taking Dad's car without permission, driving drunk, and crashing into a parked vehicle. No one was hurt, but there was significant damage to both cars. The legal fees and settlements were substantial, Dad continued, and our insurance rates skyrocketed. "I had to use the money I'd saved for your college." I sat there, stunned. "All of it?" "Most of it," he admitted. "There's maybe $1,000 left." "So, my college fund went to bail Ethan out of trouble. What about his college fund? Did you use that too?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Ethan doesn't have the same academic prospects as you. We decided years ago to invest more in experiences for him rather than college savings." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Not only had my father taken the money promised to me, but he had never even created a fund for Ethan, assuming his son wouldn't need college. Meanwhile, I had worked myself to exhaustion, maintaining perfect grades, specifically to earn scholarships to supplement what I thought Dad was saving. "You promised me," I said, my voice shaking. "I've been counting on that money." "Ethan needed it more," Dad replied defensively. "You're smart. You'll get scholarships." Ethan needed legal help or his future would be ruined. "And my future doesn't matter?" I asked. "That's not what I'm saying. You've always been the responsible one, the independent one. You'll figure it out." I walked out of the restaurant without another word. I had become the responsible one because I had to be. I had become the independent one because I couldn't depend on him. And now I was expected to figure it out because my stepbrother's drunk driving was apparently more important than my education. Mom was furious when I told her, but in her practical way, she channeled that anger into action. We spent weeks applying for every scholarship we could find. I worked even more hours, often coming home after midnight to finish homework. I applied for student loans, knowing I'd be paying them off for years. In the end, I cobbled together enough through scholarships, loans, and my savings to attend a state university with a strong computer science program. It wasn't my dream school, but it was a path forward. Dad's communication during my college years was minimal. A text on my birthday, a generic Christmas card with no personal note. When I made the dean's list every semester, there were no congratulations. When I won a coding competition that came with an internship at a respected tech firm, I didn't even bother telling him. Ethan, meanwhile, enrolled in and dropped out of 3 different colleges. Each time, Dad and Diane fully funded his tuition, apartment, and expenses. Each time, Ethan partied, skipped classes, and failed out. Yet they kept throwing good money after bad, making excuses about him, finding himself, and not being ready. I graduated with honors in computer science. Mom sat proudly in the audience alongside Mr. Martinez, who had become a true mentor, and my girlfriend at the time, Jessica. Dad had promised to come, claiming he'd booked hotel rooms for the family. The night before graduation, he called to say Ethan had an emergency situation and they couldn't make it. I later saw on social media that the emergency was a concert Ethan wanted to attend. That was the last straw. I stopped reaching out entirely. If he wanted a relationship with me, he would have to make the effort. He didn't. After graduation in 2015, I entered a job market still recovering from the recession. Despite my strong academic record and internship experience, full-time positions were scarce. After 3 months of searching and dwindling savings, I took a job at a small tech firm that paid barely above minimum wage. The position was basic IT support, far below my skill level, but it was in the industry and offered flexibility. The company, Data Core Solutions, had only 15 employees and operated out of a converted warehouse space. The environment was chaotic but energetic. Most importantly, it introduced me to Brandon Reynolds, the head of development and my direct supervisor. Brandon was in his 40s, a self-taught programmer who had worked his way up without a formal degree. He noticed my potential immediately. "You're overqualified for help desk work," he told me during my second week. "Show me what else you can do." I stayed late after my support shifts to help with coding projects. Brandon gave me increasingly complex assignments, and I delivered results that exceeded expectations. 6 months in, he advocated for my promotion to junior developer with a modest salary increase. It wasn't financial freedom, but it was progress. During this time, I lived in a tiny studio apartment with secondhand furniture. I took the bus to work, packed lunches, and lived on a strict budget. Every spare dollar went toward paying down my student loans or building a small emergency fund, while former classmates posted photos of vacations and new cars on social media. I was focused on the long game. The pivotal moment came a year into my time at Data Core. I had been developing a side project, a customer relationship management system with integrated analytics, specifically designed for small businesses. Most CRM software at the time was either too expensive or too complex for mom-and-pop operations. My solution was intuitive, affordable, and scalable. I showed the prototype to Brandon, who immediately recognized its potential. "This could be huge," he said after testing it. "Have you thought about developing this commercially?" For the next 6 months, Brandon and I refined the concept on evenings and weekends. When we had a viable product, Brandon made an unexpected proposal. He had $75,000 in savings, and he offered to invest it as seed money if I would quit my job and focus on the startup. Full-time. He would keep working at Data Core, but serve as an advisor and silent partner with a 30% stake. It was terrifying and exhilarating. At 24, with student debt and minimal savings, launching a business seemed foolhardy. But Brandon's confidence in me was unwavering, and the alternative was spending years climbing a corporate ladder. I took the leap. I named the company Mitchell Systems, and the first year was brutal. I worked from my apartment, living on Brandon's investment while building the product. There were technical challenges, marketing missteps, and moments of paralyzing self-doubt. 3 potential clients backed out at the last minute. A competitor launched a similar product at a lower price point. My laptop died in the middle of a crucial development phase, forcing me to use a significant portion of our dwindling funds on new equipment. But there were victories, too. Our first paying client, a local florist, reported a 20% increase in repeat business after implementing our system. Word of mouth led to 3 more clients. A small business blog featured our software, bringing a surge of inquiries. By month 14, we were generating enough revenue to cover basic operating costs. The breakthrough came when a regional chain of 30 hardware stores adopted our system. Their business increased so dramatically that the owner became an informal evangelist for our product, referring dozens of business contacts. Suddenly, we had a waiting list of clients. I hired my first 2 employees at the 18-month mark, a developer to help scale the software and a sales representative to manage the growing interest. We moved into a small office space. Brandon reduced his hours at Data Core to spend more time with the company. By the end of year 2, we had 15 employees and were profitable. Growth continued at a steady pace. I reinvested nearly all profits back into the business, prioritizing product development and customer service over marketing or fancy offices. Our clients stayed with us because the software worked and because we treated them like partners rather than just revenue streams. My business philosophy was shaped by my personal experiences. I built a company where merit and hard work were recognized and rewarded. We hired based on skill and potential, not credentials or connections. I implemented profit sharing so everyone benefited from our collective success. When we reached 50 employees in year 4, we still had 0 turnover, unheard of in the tech industry. The company culture became known for innovation, loyalty, and work-life balance. We offered flexible schedules, comprehensive benefits, and regular team-building activities. I wanted to create the supportive environment I had never had growing up. My employees became more than colleagues. They were a chosen family of sorts. My personal life during these years took a back seat to building the business. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious developed. Jessica and I had broken up shortly after graduation when her job took her to California. There were a few short-term relationships after that, but the demands of entrepreneurship left little time or emotional energy for romance. Instead, I built a tight circle of friends who understood the entrepreneur journey. Brandon and his wife often included me in family gatherings. Several college friends remained close, and we made time for regular get-togethers despite busy schedules. Mom and I spoke weekly, and I flew her out to visit several times a year. By 2024, 7 years after launch, Mitchell Systems had grown beyond anything I had imagined. We employed over 70 people. Our software served more than 3,000 businesses across the country, and the company valuation reached $20 million. Industry publications recognized us as an innovative leader in small business solutions. Larger corporations had made acquisition offers, which I politely declined. My personal financial situation had transformed as well. After years of modest living, I finally purchased a house. Not a mansion, but a comfortable 4-bedroom home in a good neighborhood with a dedicated office space. I paid off my student loans in full. Most importantly, I set up Mom for retirement, buying her a condo near me and creating an investment account that would ensure she never had to worry about money again. "You didn't have to do this," she protested when I showed her the condo. "You worked double shifts for years to support us." I reminded her. "You never gave up on me." This is the least I can do. Through all these years of building and growth, there was no contact with Dad, Diane, or Ethan. The last I'd heard through mutual connections was that Ethan had been working at a car dealership, but got fired for showing up late repeatedly. Dad was still at the same insurance company, having made it to middle management, but no further. They had moved to a larger house in an affluent suburb, living beyond their means. As usual, I assumed. I didn't think about them often. I had built a life that was entirely separate from my childhood wounds. Or so I thought, until my phone rang one ordinary Tuesday afternoon, and I saw my father's name on the caller ID for the first time in 7 years. The call came while I was reviewing quarterly projections with my finance team. I excused myself, stepping into my office with a strange tightness in my chest. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. "Hello," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Travis, it's your dad." His voice sounded older, but the familiar tone brought back a flood of unwanted memories. "Yes, I know. What is it?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "I was hoping we could catch up. It's been too long." He sounded uncomfortable, but friendly, as if we had drifted apart through mutual neglect rather than his repeated choices to prioritize his other family. 7 years, I stated flatly. "Yes, well," he cleared his throat. "I've been hearing about your success, the company you built. I'm proud of you, son." The word son landed like a false note in a song. He had forfeited the right to paternal pride years ago. "Thanks," I replied, not knowing what else to say. I was thinking maybe we could have dinner, the whole family, to reconnect. Diane and Ethan would love to see you too. I doubted that very much, but I found myself agreeing to meet them at a steakhouse halfway between our homes the following Friday. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, wondering what had prompted this sudden desire to reconnect after 7 years of silence. The days leading up to the dinner were filled with uncharacteristic anxiety. I mentioned the upcoming reunion to Mom during our weekly call. "Are you sure about this, Travis?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Not really," I admitted, "but I'm curious about why he reached out now." "Just protect yourself," she advised. "You've built a good life. Don't let them disrupt that." Friday arrived, and I drove to the restaurant with a knot in my stomach. I deliberately arrived 10 minutes late, not wanting to sit alone waiting for them. They were already seated at a corner table, Dad, Diane, and Ethan. Dad stood as I approached, awkwardly extending his hand before shifting to a half hug that I stiffly accepted. He had aged considerably, hair now fully gray, deeper lines around his eyes, and a slight paunch that strained his button-down shirt. Despite the physical changes, he wore the same aftershave, triggering memories I thought I'd buried. "You look great, Travis," he said, eyeing my tailored suit and watch. Diane rose next, her dyed blonde hair and excessive jewelry unchanged. "Oh, Travis, look at you, all grown up and successful." She attempted to kiss my cheek, but I subtly shifted so she caught mostly air. Her perfume was overwhelming. Ethan remained seated, offering a curt nod. He had gained significant weight, his face puffy and complexion poor. His designer polo shirt had a small stain on the collar, and his handshake was limp when he finally extended it. "Nice to see you all," I lied, taking my seat and immediately reaching for the water glass. The initial conversation was painfully artificial. Questions about my company that showed they had researched it but understood little about what we actually did. Comments about the weather, the restaurant, the traffic on the way over. Dad mentioned mutual acquaintances I barely remembered. "Bill Johnson's son. You remember him from the neighborhood? He just made partner at his law firm," Dad said with emphasis, as if drawing a comparison to my achievements. "That's great," I replied without interest. I hadn't thought about the Johnsons in 15 years. A waiter came to take our orders, providing brief relief from the strained conversation. I noticed Dad ordering an expensive bottle of wine without checking the price, unusual for a man who had always complained about restaurant markups. As appetizers arrived, Diane took control of the conversation. "We always knew you would do well, Travis. Even when you were little, Robert would say, 'That boy is going places.' We talk about you all the time." The revisionist history was jarring. In their version, they had always supported me, always believed in me. Dad nodded along, adding, the way you picked up computers so quickly. I told my colleagues at work, my son is a natural. I let the lies stand, curious to see how far they would take this fabricated narrative. Between comments, I observed their interactions. Dad deferred to Diane on most topics. Ethan checked his phone constantly, contributing little beyond complaints about the service and food. So, Travis, Diane continued, leaning forward. Tell us about your company. Robert said you have how many employees now? 73, I answered. And you're the big boss, she exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm. The CEO? Just imagine, Robert. Our Travis is a CEO. The possessive our Travis made my jaw clench. I was not theirs in any meaningful way. What about you, Ethan? I asked, deliberately changing the subject. What are you up to these days? He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. Between things right now, the job market is tough. Dad quickly interjected. Ethan was in sales at Hamilton Motors until recently. Management issues, right, son? Ethan muttered something about incompetent supervisors and reached for more bread. Throughout dinner, I noticed Dad wearing a Rolex I hadn't seen before. Diane mentioned their recent trip to Cancun. Ethan complained about the transmission issues on his relatively new Audi. Yet, there were hints of financial strain beneath the displays of prosperity. Dad's subtle wince when the bill arrived. Diane's comment about cutting back on the house cleaner. Ethan's remark about moving back home temporarily. As dessert was served, Dad leaned forward with forced casualness. We should do this again soon. Maybe you could come over to the house next time. Diane is a wonderful cook. Or, you could come see my place, I suggested, watching their reactions. The eager acceptance was immediate and telling. We'd love that, Diane exclaimed. Wouldn't we, Robert? We set a date for the following weekend. As we walked to the parking lot, Dad lingered behind with me while Diane and Ethan went ahead. It's really good to see you doing so well, Travis, he said, sounding almost genuine. I always knew you had it in you. Did you? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. He seemed not to notice, clapping me on the shoulder. Of course, you were always the smart one. I drove home with a growing suspicion about their sudden reappearance in my life. Later that evening, curious, I looked up Ethan on social media. His profile was mostly private, but recent public posts included complaints about ungrateful employers and how family is all you can count on. A mutual connection confirmed what I had suspected. Ethan had been fired from the car dealership 3 months ago for consistently missing sales targets and arguments with management. The next morning, Diane sent me a text message full of emojis and exclamation points, saying how wonderful it was to have our family back together and how she always thought of me as a second son. The transparent flattery only deepened my skepticism about their motives. My instincts were telling me there was an agenda behind this reunion. Sunday dinner at my house would reveal whether my suspicions were correct. I spent the week deliberately not preparing for their visit. My house was already well kept, and I refused to make special efforts for people who had never made any for me. I did order food from a high-end catering service, not to impress them, but because I didn't want to waste time cooking. They arrived promptly at 6, Dad carrying an expensive bottle of wine that I recognized as being beyond his usual price range. Their reactions upon entering my home were exactly what I had anticipated, a mixture of poorly concealed envy and exaggerated praise. This is just gorgeous, Travis, Diane exclaimed, eyes darting around to assess the value of everything. You have such wonderful taste. Dad whistled appreciatively at the open concept living area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a small but well-landscaped backyard. You've done well for yourself, son. Really well. Ethan said little but wandered around, touching things, picking up the smart home controller, examining my entertainment system, peering at the artwork on the walls as if checking for price tags. I gave them a brief tour, noticing how Diane lingered in my home office where awards and company milestones were displayed. Dad asked pointed questions about the neighborhood and property values. Ethan disappeared for several minutes, and I later found him upstairs looking into my bedrooms. Just checking out the setup, he said with an unconvincing smile when I asked what he was doing during dinner. The conversation initially followed the same superficial pattern as our restaurant meeting. Dad asked about my journey to success, clearly fishing for details about company finances without being direct. Diane commented repeatedly on how I must be so busy and probably hardly have time for a personal life, her way of determining if I was single. Ethan remained mostly silent, occasionally making snide remarks about tech bros between large bites of food. After the main course, as we moved to the living room with coffee and dessert, Dad finally revealed the purpose behind their sudden reappearance in my life. Travis, we've been thinking, he began, setting down his coffee cup with deliberate care, about Ethan's career situation. I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. As you know, he's had some challenges finding the right fit professionally, Dad continued, choosing his words carefully. And it occurred to us, with your company doing so well and clearly in need of good people, that there might be an opportunity there. An opportunity? I repeated, keeping my expression neutral. Yes. Diane jumped in enthusiastically. Ethan has always had such people skills. He would be perfect in management. I turned to look at Ethan, who suddenly sat up straighter. You want a job at my company? Not just any job, Dad clarified. We were thinking something in management. Maybe operations director or sales manager. Something that uses his interpersonal abilities. The audacity was breathtaking. After 7 years of no contact, they expected me to hand Ethan, who couldn't hold down a basic sales job, a high-level management position in the company I had built from nothing. What is your management experience, Ethan? I asked, calmly. He shifted uncomfortably. I supervised 2 junior salespeople at Hamilton for a while. Before you were let go, I added. His face flushed. That was political. The sales director had it out for me. And before that, the other jobs? Dad interjected before Ethan could answer. Look, Travis, everyone has setbacks. The point is, we're family. Family helps family. You're in a position to give Ethan the opportunity he needs to really shine. I do not hire family, I stated. It is company policy. Policies can be changed when you're the boss, Diane said with a tight smile. I would need to see a resume, I continued, ignoring her comment. References from previous employers. The same application process everyone goes through. Dad waved his hand dismissively. Come on, Travis. This is Ethan. We're talking about your brother. Stepbrother, I corrected, who I have not seen or heard from in 7 years. That's water under the bridge. Diane insisted. We're here now, reconnecting. This is what family does. Supports each other. I took a deep breath. If Ethan wants to apply for an entry-level position and work his way up based on performance, I would consider his application like anyone else's. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Entry-level. Ethan finally spoke, voice tight with indignation. I'm not some college kid looking for his first job. No, I agreed. College kids generally finish college. His face turned a deeper red. You think you're so much better than everyone else now that you have money. This is not about money, I explained, maintaining my composure. My company succeeds because we hire qualified people and promote based on merit. I would be doing a disservice to my employees if I put someone with no relevant experience into management. Dad leaned forward, his friendly facade falling away. After everything we did for you, growing up, this is how you repay us? You wouldn't even be where you are if not for the values we instilled in you. The absurdity of his statement nearly made me laugh. What exactly did you do for me, Dad? What values did you instill? Was it when you missed my tech competition for Ethan's basketball game? When you took my college fund to bail him out after he drove drunk? Or maybe when you skipped my college graduation for a concert? That's ancient history, Dad dismissed with a wave. Parents make mistakes. We did our best with both of you boys. Your best was pretty one-sided, I observed. Diane's artificial sweetness vanished entirely. We raised you for 10 years in our home, Travis. We clothed you, fed you, provided a roof over your head. You owe us. I was your husband's legal and financial responsibility as his child. I corrected her. That is not the same as raising me. And it certainly does not mean I owe Ethan a job he's not qualified for. So that's it. Dad demanded, standing up. We reach out to reconnect, and you can't even help your brother with something as simple as a job. If he wants to apply properly and start at the appropriate level, I already said I would. Consider it. Ethan stood now, his fists clenched. I am not working some minimum wage tech support job just because you have some chip on your shoulder about the past. Then I cannot help you, I said simply. You ungrateful little. Dad began, but caught himself. I could make things difficult. For you, Travis. The family still respects me, your grandparents, your cousins, if they knew how you were treating us. Are you threatening to turn the extended family against me? I asked incredulously. People I haven't seen in a decade because you stopped including me in family gatherings? Robert. Diane put her hand on his arm, suddenly aware things were spiraling. Let's all calm down. Travis, honey, we're just asking you to consider helping family in a time of need. Ethan has bills, student loans from those colleges. The colleges he dropped out of, I added. He tried, she snapped. Not everyone is like you. Some people need more support, more chances. I agree, I said, standing as well. And he has had dozens of chances from you. But not with my company. Not with the livelihoods of 73 people who depend on competent leadership. Dad pointed his finger at me. You listen to me. After everything I sacrificed for you. Growing up, that was the breaking point. Sacrificed? What exactly did you sacrifice? You chose your new family over me at every opportunity. You abandoned me emotionally, then financially. You made it crystal clear that Ethan was your priority, your real son. And now you show up after 7 years of silence because you want something. No, this discussion is over. I think you should leave. Diane attempted one last approach, tears suddenly appearing on command. We're just trying to be a family again. We were never a family, I said quietly. You made sure of that a long time ago. Please, leave. They gathered their things in stony silence. At the door, Dad turned back. This is not over, Travis. You will regret turning your back on family. After they left, I poured myself a drink and sat in the sudden quiet of my living room. I had expected some kind of ulterior motive, but the sheer entitlement had still managed to shock me. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly they would escalate the situation. The week that followed was a barrage of increasingly hostile messages. It began with guilt-tripping texts from Diane about how I had broken your father's heart and destroyed Ethan's last hope. When those went unanswered, Dad's messages became more aggressive, invoking obligations and debts I supposedly owed them. After everything we did for you, this is how you repay us, by spitting in our faces, one message read. Ethan's contribution was a rambling, profanity-laced voicemail about how I thought I was too good for family now, and how my success was just lucky timing rather than skill or hard work. I blocked their numbers after 3 days of this, but the harassment continued through email and even LinkedIn messages. Dad somehow obtained my assistant's contact information and began leaving messages with her, each one marked family emergency. The situation reached its breaking point on Thursday morning. I was in a meeting with our development team when my assistant interrupted, looking uncomfortable. I'm sorry to disturb you, but your father is in the lobby. He's demanding to see you and refuses to leave. Security is asking how you want to handle it. I excused myself and headed to the front of the building. Through the glass doors, I could see Dad pacing aggressively, gesturing as he argued with the receptionist and security guard. His face was flushed with anger, his tie askew. As soon as he saw me, he pointed accusingly. There he is, the big important CEO who's too good for his family. Several employees stopped to stare. I maintained my composure, addressing the security guard. Please, escort Mr. Mitchell to the small conference room. I will speak with him there. You damn right you will, Dad muttered as he followed the guard. Once we were alone in the conference room with the door closed, I spoke first. This is completely inappropriate. You cannot come to my workplace and cause a scene. I wouldn't have to if you would answer your damn phone, he shot back. You blocked all of us, your own family. What do you want, Dad? Really? Because this has gone beyond ridiculous. He took a deep breath, straightening his tie in a poor attempt to regain dignity. I want you to reconsider giving Ethan a position. A real position, not some entry-level nonsense. That is not happening, I stated firmly. And showing up here like this only confirms I made the right decision. Then I have no choice, he said, his voice suddenly cold. As of this moment, you are no longer my son. You are dead to me and this family. I will make sure everyone knows how you turned your back on us when we needed you. I should have felt something at these words. Hurt, anger, loss. Instead, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity and release. You cannot disown someone who stopped being your son years ago, I said quietly. You made your choice a long time ago, Dad. You chose Diane and Ethan. You traded me for your new family the moment they came into your life. Every time, you missed my events for Ethan's. Every time you dismissed my achievements while celebrating his mediocrity. Every time you provided for him while leaving me to fend for myself. His face registered shock at my calmness. You cannot take away what you never gave. You are my father in name only. Brandon Reynolds has been more of a father figure to me in 7 years than you were in 20. So go ahead, tell the extended family whatever story makes you feel better. The people who matter in my life know the truth. You ungrateful little. He began, rising from his chair. This conversation is over. I cut him off. Security will escort you out. If you return to these premises or contact my employees again, I will file for a restraining order. I pressed the intercom button and asked security to come in. Dad continued to shout as they led him away, but his words no longer had any power over me. I had finally said what I needed to say after all these years. I called an emergency meeting with our HR director and security team. We implemented protocols to prevent further disruptions, alert notifications at reception, blocked email, domains, updated contact instructions. I briefly explained to my executive team that I was dealing with a personal matter involving estranged family members making inappropriate demands. Your family is trying to get jobs here, my operations director asked, confused. They are not my family, I replied. Not in any way that matters. The aftermath continued for several days. Diane left tearful voicemails on my home phone. Ethan posted vague, threatening messages on social media that mutual connections forwarded to me. Dad apparently did call several extended family members, as I received a confused email from an aunt I hadn't spoken to in years, asking why I was rejecting reconciliation. I did not respond to any of it. The severing was complete, and I felt lighter for it. 3 weeks later, I received an unexpected call from a former neighbor in my dad's community. Mrs. Wilkins had always been kind to me as a child and had apparently kept loose tabs on my success. I thought you should know, she said hesitantly. Your father lost his job last month. The insurance company had major layoffs. I see the for sale sign in front of their house now. I thanked her for the information without commenting further. Later that day, an email appeared in my work account from an address I didn't recognize. It was from Diane, having created a new email to bypass my blocks. Travis, I know we've had our differences, but I'm reaching out in desperation. It began. Your father lost his position due to corporate downsizing. We have been struggling financially for some time, trying to help Ethan with his debts. Now we are 3 months behind on the mortgage and the bank is foreclosing. We have nowhere to go. I wouldn't ask if we had any other option, but we need help. A loan, perhaps, just until Robert finds another position. Please, Travis, whatever issues you have with us, we are still family. The email concluded with details about their mortgage amount and a sob story about how Ethan's mental health was suffering due to their circumstances. I sat with this information for several days, working through my feelings with my therapist. Part of me felt a vengeful satisfaction. They were facing consequences for years of financial mismanagement and enabling Ethan's irresponsibility. Another part felt a pull of guilt. Cultural programming about family obligations runs deep. After careful consideration, I drafted a response. Diane, I am sorry to hear about your financial difficulties. However, I will not be providing financial assistance. The relationship between us was severed by your own actions and choices over many years, culminating in your recent attempt to exploit my success for Ethan's benefit. I do not wish you ill, but I cannot and will not take responsibility for your financial decisions. There are social services and financial counseling resources available in your community that may be of assistance. I ask again that you respect my boundaries and cease all contact. Travis. Her reply was immediate and vitriolic. all pretense of politeness gone. She called me heartless, cruel, and ungrateful. She detailed all they had supposedly done for me and how I was abandoning them in their hour of need. The final line read, "You will regret this when we are living in our car and your father has a heart attack from the stress you caused." I did not respond. Instead, I blocked the new email address and instructed my IT team to implement stronger filtering. The guilt I might have felt was washed away by her manipulative tactics. I had made the right decision. That night, I called Mom and told her everything that had happened. She listened without interrupting, then sighed heavily. "You know, Travis, for years, I was careful never to speak badly about your father. I wanted you to form your own opinions. But I will say this now, you did the right thing. You owe them nothing. Your responsibility is to your own well-being and the company you built." Her validation meant everything. "Thanks, Mom, for everything. Just remember," she added softly, "their problems are not your fault, and they are not your responsibility to fix. You broke the cycle. Be proud of that." The confrontation with my father and his family left me with unexpected emotional aftermath. Though I had maintained composure throughout the ordeal, the weeks following brought waves of anger, grief, and confusion that surprised me. I had thought those wounds long healed, but the recent events had ripped off scabs I didn't know remained. At Brandon's suggestion, I started seeing Dr. Marissa Chun, a therapist specializing in family trauma. Initially skeptical, I found our sessions increasingly valuable. She helped me understand that my childhood experiences had shaped my adult behaviors in ways I hadn't recognized. My intense self-reliance, my discomfort with vulnerability, my tendency to overwork. "You built an impressive life despite the abandonment you experienced," Dr. Chen observed during one session. "But part of you is still that boy trying to prove his worth through achievement. Is that so bad?" I asked. "It led to success." "Success, yes. But has it led to fulfillment, to connection?" Her question lingered with me for days. I had built a thriving company, financial security, and a comfortable life. But close relationships, those remained challenging. I had friends, certainly, but I kept most people at a careful distance. Romance had been a series of short-term connections that fizzled when they became too intimate. Over 6 months of therapy, I began addressing these patterns. I learned to recognize when I was retreating into work to avoid emotional discomfort. I practiced setting boundaries without building walls. Most importantly, I started to internalize that my father's abandonment reflected his failings, not mine. During this period of personal work, I deepened my relationship with my mother. Beyond our weekly calls, I began sharing more of my inner world with her. One weekend, I flew her to Chicago and showed her the company I had built, introducing her to my team and showing her the impact of our work. "I always knew you would do something extraordinary," she said, eyes shining as she toured our offices. "But more than your success, I am proud of the man you have become. How you treat others, the integrity you show, that matters more than any business achievement." I also reconnected with my mother's side of the family, cousins, aunts, and uncles I had fallen out of touch with during my years of intensive company building. My cousin Jake and I discovered a shared interest in hiking, leading to monthly excursions in nearby state parks. My Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister, invited me to family gatherings I had previously declined due to work commitments. I began attending, finding unexpected joy in these connections. Meanwhile, Mitchell Systems continued to thrive. Inspired by my own journey, I implemented a new company initiative, a mentorship program for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. We partnered with local high schools and community colleges to identify students with aptitude but limited resources, offering internships, training, and scholarship opportunities. The program's first cohort included 17-year-old Marcus, whose single mother worked 2 jobs to support their family. His enthusiasm for coding reminded me of myself at that age. But unlike me, he would have guidance and support on his journey. Watching him flourish under our lead developer's mentorship brought a satisfaction different from any business achievement. Through mutual connections, I occasionally heard updates about my father's family. They had indeed lost their house, downsizing to a small apartment in a less affluent neighborhood. Dad found employment at a much smaller insurance agency with a significant pay cut. Ethan was working retail at an electronics store, ironically, one that sold our company's point of sale software. There was a certain symmetry to it all, though I took no pleasure in their difficulties. The anger I had carried for so long gradually transformed into something else. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a kind of release. They no longer occupied significant space in my thoughts. I had stopped checking for messages from them or worrying about potential confrontations. The power they once held over my emotions had dissipated. This emotional freedom created space for new connections. At a tech conference in Boston, I met Alexis Raymond, a brilliant software engineer who had founded her own educational technology startup. Unlike previous relationships where I had kept parts of myself carefully guarded, I found myself sharing my full story with her. The childhood abandonment, the recent confrontation, the healing journey. That explains a lot about your company culture, she observed after listening intently. You built the supportive environment you never had. Our relationship developed slowly but deeply. For the first time, I was with someone who saw all of me, the successful CEO and the wounded child, the confident leader and the man still learning to trust. Alexis had her own complicated family history, creating a mutual understanding that felt both rare and precious. As our connection grew, so did my understanding of what true family meant. It was not defined by DNA or legal ties, but by choice, respect, and consistent presence. My chosen family included Brandon and his wife, who had believed in me when I had nothing but an idea. It included my core team at Mitchell Systems who had been there through the lean early days. It included Mom, who had sacrificed everything to give me stability. And now it included Alexis, who loved me not despite my complicated history, but with full awareness of it. One Sunday afternoon, nearly a year after the final confrontation with my father, Alexis and I were having brunch with Mom and Brandon's family. Looking around the table at these people who had chosen to be in my life, who had earned their place through loyalty and love, I felt a profound sense of peace. You know, I said to Alexis later that evening as we walked along the lakefront, I spent so many years thinking I needed to heal from being unwanted, but that was never true. I was wanted, just not by him. And that was his loss, not mine. She squeezed my hand. There. Rejection was the price of your freedom to become who you are, rather than who they wanted you to be. In that moment, I realized the greatest gift of this difficult journey, the freedom to build a life on my own terms, guided by values I had chosen rather than inherited. If and when I became a father myself, I would break the cycle completely, creating a home where love was unconditional, where achievement was celebrated but never required for belonging, where family meant showing up consistently, not just when you needed something. The company continues to grow, but my sense of identity is no longer exclusively tied to its success. I have discovered joy in the spaces between achievements, in Sunday hikes with my cousin, in teaching Marcus to drive, in quiet evenings with Alexis, discussing books, rather than business. The path forward is not without challenges. Old habits of self-protection emerge occasionally. The impulse to retreat into work during emotional stress requires conscious resistance. But the difference now is awareness. I recognize these patterns as remnants of old wounds rather than fundamental truths about who I am. If there is wisdom I have gained from this journey, it is this: family is not an obligation, but a privilege earned through love, respect, and consistent care. Blood ties may determine our beginnings, but they need not define our entire story. We have the power to choose who belongs in our lives, to build connections based on mutual value rather than obligation. The greatest act of self-love sometimes is walking away from those who cannot see your worth, creating space for those who can. And the most profound healing comes not from changing others, but from changing the stories we tell ourselves about what we deserve.